Welcome to ChristiTutionalist Politics Podcast, aka CTP, in association with Savage Unfiltered Podcast, TheLibertyBeacon.com, and I am your host, Joseph M. Leonard, and that's Lenard. CTP is your no muss, no fuss, just me, you type podcast. As Graham Norton would say, let's get on with the show! God and Guns. Shout out at first to Leonard Skinnard, their God and Guns tune, talking to a politician about a brand new mission, but it all came undone when he got around to God and Guns. So obviously you know where this episode is going, the connection between the two. So let's first start off with the obvious left-wing rant, because the latest, of course, is them trying to ban magazines with more than X number of bullets. You don't need 30 bullets to kill a deer. No, you don't. But the Second Amendment isn't just about hunting. It's about fighting tyrannical government, protections against a government that might get tyrannical. And you know what? You also don't need 30 bullets to stop a single intruder. You don't know what you're going to encounter. So yes, you need lots of bullets in case. Because what if the blackline Marxists, Antifa, violent mobs land up on your neighborhood? You need 30 bullets, potentially. What if you're in any area where there are gangs? And these gangs are, of course, illegally armed because you know what, you morons on the left? The criminals don't give one whit about your gun laws. Say, if you're married, by way of example. They happen to notice you and your wife. So they take a liking to your wife and decide, hey, let's follow them home and try to gangbang your wife. You need 30 bullets, potentially more, to potentially fend off that gang of 5 gangbangers loaded up in 3 vehicles piling out and coming to break into your home. Like I already said, I'm not going to repeat it. It's obviously not a pleasant thought. It's a horrific example to have to use, but it's a real world potential example. And ask the people at the Bundy Ranch about the need to be armed against a governmental overreach, land dispute that should have been settled in courts, but no, they sent out a bunch of federal agents. Of course, there was the Bundy Ranch standoff. And if it wouldn't have been for a bunch of other people showing up on horses all armed, does anyone remember Ruby Ridge? If you don't, look that up. The Bundys might have very coincidentally, very simply been Ruby Ridged. The other obvious one, and I know I'll catch flack because I didn't look up the immediate exact stat of 2023 that the show is airing, but I'm going to give out these stats. As the saying goes, seconds matter. The police are minutes away, if they're coming at all. We've all heard stories of shootings and cops showing up 30 minutes, hour later to clean up the mess after it's all shaken out. So you have a Second Amendment right to defend yourself, your family, your property, your state, against a tyrannical federal government. But the stat, it's an older stat. Again, Media Matters will probably say, oh, he's actually inaccurate because I'm using older stats. Stats change a little here and there, but this is basically the same truth. A mass shooting event where a law-abiding gun owner is carrying and is there to confront a person, the average number of deaths are 2.3, or that's what the stat was a few years ago. Going to be around the same area. It might be 2.1, it might be 2.5. That's not what's relevant here. 2 is the basic number. Whereas if you're waiting on the police to respond to your gun-free slaughter zone because no one else is there to confront them lawfully, the average number then was 14.3. Again, 14.1, 14.5, 14.7, whatever. The basic number 14, that differentiation of 12. So the next time a leftist talks to you about the need for more gun-free slaughter zones, tell them this fact, this basic stats, and that obviously they are all for a dozen more people, on average, dying in a mass shooting event. That's what ends up being the bottom line. The more gun-free slaughter zones there are, the more deaths, because again, the criminals don't pay any attention to your doofus and unconstitutional gun laws. The other thing is I want to mention here, since I'm Detroit area based, Michigan based, fellow Michiganian, Brian Terry. His family, some of them still live here in Michigan. Brian Terry, if you don't recall the name, was the Customs and Border Protection agent that was slaughtered by the Mexican cartel with illegal Obama and Eric Holder Fast and Furious gun scandal, scheme, farce, something they engaged in illegally. And yeah, sometimes, and you can argue entrapment, but we allow some things to happen and progress, but we're supposed to intercede. As you all know, I am the author of Terror Strikes Coming Soon to a City Near You. FBI infiltrates terror groups and allows them to progress to a point while they collect information, line up a list of the suspects, and then intercede or are supposed to intercede before the catastrophe is allowed to happen. While Fast and Furious went south and they let those guns get further into the system than they were supposed to. They were supposed to be used, never should have been allowed that operation in the first place, to literally put guns in the hands of criminals that they expected would get to the cartels, but then not intercede when the deal to put them in cartel hands came about. That's where the interdiction was supposed to happen, and those guns taken back off the street didn't happen. Brian Terry was shot down with a Fast and Furious gun because of Obama and Eric Holder mismanagement of a sting operation, basically saying. So this is God and guns. So I've got my notes. I'm going to skip ahead here. The first biblical concern here, as I want to mention, is really it's thou shalt not murder. It's been improperly and translated from the original Aramaic, Hebrew, Greek, Latin to thou shalt not kill. That's not proper because there are biblical situations. Killing, including defense of yourself, is allowed. Exodus 22:2. If a thief is caught breaking in at night and is struck a fatal blow, the defender is not guilty of bloodshed. Obviously, if you're using a weapon against an intruder with a weapon and they die from it, you're not guilty of murder. That's what we call a mitigating circumstance in a law, and the law allows for self-defense, and that is biblical. The other thing, real quick to mention, is the death penalty. is very biblical. But yeah, I don't understand. A lot of Christians get queasy and say they're against the death penalty. There's only one thing assures a criminal will not kill again, and that is putting them to death. I'm not going to read them. I'm just going to mention for you to look for yourself. Genesis 9:6, Numbers 35:30, Leviticus 24:17. And for someone who wants to say, well, those are all very old references, Jesus came to fulfill the Torah. He came to fulfill the Jewish scriptures. Jesus, King of the Jews. We weren't meant to start a whole new faith, but yet we went ahead and gone and done that. Messianic Jews, of course, followers of Christ in the true sense that Jesus Christ, the Messiah, come to fulfill the Jewish scriptures. So in some sense, don't get mad at me, but they are technically more proper in a biblical sense, but we consider an Old Testament and a New Testament, but they're together in the Bible. Please don't give me this. The Old Testament doesn't matter. The Ten Commandments don't matter then? None of those matter? Spare me, because I hear these really dumb arguments like, well, that's from the Old Testament. Yeah, so that's no longer valid unless if Jesus said something and it's there in his words in the New Testament as he was the ultimate final Messiah come to fulfill the scriptures, the final blood sacrifice. That's why we as Christians don't sacrifice animals. He was the final blood sacrifice. So yeah, Old Testament sacrifices of animals is indeed no longer relevant, but the entire Old Testament isn't irrelevant. I'm not going to go too much more. I hit on the main points. This is meant to correlate, meant to complement thelibertybeacon.com piece that will drop the same Saturday as Season 1, Episode 21 show that will be entitled God and Guns. I've not covered everything. I'm not intending to cover everything. Again, they complement each other. There will be things in the show that won't be in the article, some things in the article that are not covered in the show. They're meant to complement. You're meant to do both. Yeah, you could do one or the other, get a gist of what we're talking about, but please visit both Buzzsprout preferably. Yeah, you could go to iHeart or Amazon Music or Spotify, but Saturday morning, the show drops on Buzzsprout. It takes 12, 24, 48 hours to get to the 15 other platforms I'm currently up to on that the show matriculates to over time. But first thing Saturday morning, usually before noon, the new show drops every Saturday. Same with thelibertybeacon.com. The new article drops every Saturday before noon. So please check out both places every Saturday. Whatever's mixed here, the article will have some embedded videos. If you go to the article, I plan on embedding Leonard Skinner's God and Guns, as well as some other videos that complement and add to the whole overall subject. So please check those out. See you again next week. We're going to go into another interview. I don't like to call them that, a discussion. This will be a topic of another article from the Liberty Beacon that was actually published before this show ever started. So there's not an episode dedicated to it. Stay tuned to that interview. Take care. God bless. You all may be wondering why there are sports team logos behind me if you're seeing this on the sneak peek video preview via my @JLeonardDetroit YouTube or Rumble channel. And that is because I have my friend Derek Stone of Stone Cold Sports Truth, which is on Wham Radio, And yes, I'm going to do the obligatory joke I do every time. It's WAAM, not the wake me up before you go kind of Wham. Wham1600.com. This is a politics show. Why sports? Well, this show also is in conjunction with my thelibertybeacon.com pieces. Back in May, I wrote a piece titled Occasional Breaks Not Just Okay, but Healthy, which discussed some sports. So I'm putting to practice what I preach, an occasional break from politics, as long as we don't stay permanently distracted with the bread and circus, the political term. It's an okay thing. So welcome to the show, Derek Stone.
Thank you very much, Joe. I'm glad to be here, and I just have a little correction to make. Our website is whamradio.com.
What did I say?
You said wham1600.com.
Oh, yeah, I did, didn't I? Yeah, it is Wham 1600 AM Ann Arbor, Michigan. But yes, whamradio.com. And there is a listen live link. And if they want to listen to the Stone Cold Sports Truth live, of course, they can find it later on SoundCloud. But if they want to listen to you live, you are when on whamradio.com?
Yep, you just click the Listen Live button in the upper right corner of whamradio.com, and you can listen to my program and all the other great Wham programming around the clock every day. My program is on Sunday afternoons from 12:30 to 1.
You pack a whole lot in that half hour.
Yeah, I have to really be on point and getting all of the key points from all of the sports events that I cover throughout the year, especially now during football season, now that I'm covering the Michigan Wolverines football team and the Detroit Lions in a half hour. There is a lot I have to pack into that half hour. It is very fast paced. It kind of reminds me a little bit of Chris Berman on ESPN when he would always have his fastest 2 minutes in sports.
I remember that. And full disclosure to anyone watching or listening to the audio version, I'm looking over at the calendar. We are actually recording this. It'll play who knows when later, September the 26th. So bear that in mind when you hear us talking, because yeah, Derek's last show last Sunday, I called in. He crammed in both U of M football and the Lions. That piece that I wrote about occasional distractions was back in April, May, June at the latest, talking a lot about the Michigan Panthers and how we would likely see a championship banner from the Panthers at Ford Field long before we see one from the Lions. Now, we're only 3 games in, given this recording time, 2-1, fair start. I will be hopeful, but I'm not optimistic because I have a whole life history of the Ford ownership curse, right?
Yeah, I hear you on that, Joe. I've been cursed by the Detroit Lions franchise since I was a wee young man when I started following the Lions, when the legendary Barry Sanders was patrolling the field at the Silverdome. That was arguably the most fantastic home field advantage. When the Silverdome got loud, nothing compared to it. The vantage points were poor for the fans. When they got loud, it made it such a great home field advantage, and Barry Sanders made it all the more special during his time with the Lions. And unfortunately, they just did not surround him with enough talent to be able to get to the Super Bowl. They had some nice players along the way, Herman Moore, Johnny Morton, and they brought in Scott Mitchell. He was, as the quarterback, he was able to throw for a pretty good amount of yardage during his time with the Lions, but he just did not have that Joe Montana or Tom Brady type ability to be able to consistently lead the team. And unfortunately, the defense just wasn't Super Bowl caliber enough. They had some pretty good players at times. Robert Porsche, arguably, I think is, as of right now, their best defensive end in franchise history. Aiden Hutchinson, when it's all said and done, will probably end up being number 1 in Lions history and at that position. But yeah, they just didn't have enough high quality players at every position. And now it looks like they've got a lot of depth at multiple positions out there on the field. All starts with a quarterback play. Who would have thought I would have been saying this about Jared Goff when they acquired him from what's now the Los Angeles Rams, formerly the St. Louis Rams? When Goff and former Lions quarterback Matt Stafford traded places, I'm thinking this seems to be a throw in the towel moment for the Lions, because Stafford, arguably before he was traded, the best quarterback in Lions history. Yeah, I know some people would say Bobby Lane from the 1950s. Stafford just had the stronger arm, and he could make any type of throw out there on the field. Wasn't able to consistently lead the Lions in a way that was in championship form. But Jared Goff, he has had a revitalization of his career. He was good with the Rams, but now he's so much better now with the Lions. Ben Johnson, their offensive.
Absolutely agree wholeheartedly with that. I thought a couple points you went down there. The issue here is the Fords have never been willing to spend the money more than have one or two highlight reel players out there, but never build a full team. Whether they've got spent enough for the full depth, I still think they may be one or two free agents away. But again, let's hope. They've got a favorable schedule. So if they're going to do something, this is the year to do it and prove it. And I thought, I hated to see Stafford go. I did think at the time, with what they were getting with Goff, somewhat lateral move, because it's like with hockey we talk about all the time. You take a player like Zadina, didn't work out here. He's now gone. They just released him to release that salary cap. He's now in San Jose. He may take off there. He didn't work here. So ultimately, that may be indeed a good deal. But you mentioned Silverdome, what that held almost like 80,000 people. And I remember going to one game, a Thanksgiving game, way back when, that very upper row, we were the top row, and it's like looking down at ants on the field. But it was loud.
Yeah, it was always special, those games at the Silverdome, just watching Barry with his famous juke moves, faking the opposing players out of their shoes. It was just so much fun to watch, and he just made it all the more special. And that's what you got to love about certain outdated venues like the Silverdome. It was certain players, not necessarily teams. In this case, it was just Barry Sanders that made the Silverdome memorable, not just the amenities of the Silverdome for the fans, like being able to go to a luxury box suite and have an all-you-can-eat buffet and have great vantage points and all the great concession areas, all about the sporting event itself when you go to any sports venue. And yeah, I like all of the special amenities. I don't get to be able to experience them because I don't make a whole lot of money, obviously. I can't buy a luxury box suite at a Lions game or Red Wings game or any other Detroit sports team. It's all about the players. That's what I focus on if I go to attend a game in person. They make the memories for me, not the amenities.
I've been fortunate growing up. My father worked for GM, logistics for the trucks, parts coming in and out and whatnot. So the truck lines all had suites. I was fortunate growing up. We certainly didn't have the money for a suite either, but we got into suites, including the Jones Trucking Super Suite at JLA that was next to Illich's one time. It's like, wow, talk about a luxury suite. And I have my Detroit Fury Cup from back when the Fury was playing arena football at the Palace. And yes, people, both the Palace and the Silverdome have been razzed. Other things going on those properties. But I was the creator of the first fan Detroit Arena Football fan club when the Fury was here. I got lucky and got gifted a suite to a basketball game. So I got to experience the suite there at the Palace too. So those are nice, but most people aren't that lucky, and I know how lucky I am, but not to make this only about Detroit sports. And the Lions hysteria aside, then some people, oh my God, they're going to win the Super Bowl this year. Oh God, give me a break. I did put $1 down on the Lions though, because the return on that dollar is good if a miracle happens. But who do you think, can Kansas City repeat?
It hasn't been done since 2004 when the New England Patriots were able to accomplish that feat. So the odds are certainly against the Kansas City Chiefs in repeating, but you can't discount the fact that they have the best quarterback in the game right now, Patrick Mahomes. And the Lions, they got a little bit of luck in that opening game against the Chiefs, beating them only by a point. But the Lions, they played a pretty good defensive game overall against the Kansas City Chiefs. Yes, they were without their big target at tight end, Travis Kelce. But the Lions, you could point out they didn't have Jameson Williams, their young wide receiver prospect. And Lions fans know from last season, he caught that 41-yard touchdown pass against the Minnesota Vikings. So he's definitely, and he has 4.25 40-yard speed. So he's definitely a fast receiver. If the Lions would have had Williams, and let's say the Chiefs had Kelce, probably might have been a shootout. And who knows, maybe the Lions would have still come out on top, but we'll never know. But it was great to see the Lions come out on top in that game. Going forward, you got to look at the long view. You certainly got to like the Chiefs' chances to repeat because of Patrick Mahomes and his ability, especially last year. His top wide receiver target, Tyreek Hill, was traded to the Miami Dolphins. And keep an eye out for that Dolphins team. They just put 70 points on the Denver Broncos. Who would have thought that would have ever happened with a Sean Payton coached Broncos team? And Peyton having all of that success with Drew Brees in New Orleans, and then he comes back after a year off from coaching to coach Russell Wilson, a fine quarterback, getting back to the Chiefs and their chances to repeat. You certainly got to like their chances despite Mahomes' lack of big-time targets at the wide receiver position because he still has that huge target in Travis Kelce.
Yeah, and before we move on from football, I want to go to hockey, my preferred and favorite sport. I played it amateur as a youth up into and through high school. Didn't get a chance to turn that into a collegiate opportunity and then anything else. But I want to share the joke. I made a note so I wouldn't forget it. By all means, if you like this, feel free to borrow it. I call Detroit's offense now the Dan Campbell version, Detroit style run and shoot. Why? Because you run for 15 yards and oh shoot, we shot ourselves in the foot with another bad untimely penalty, bringing it back. You like that one?
Yeah, that's pretty good. I know.
That's pretty good, right? Because that's the same old Lions. Always untimely penalties, killing the drive or keeping the opponent's drive alive. But anyway, the Wings, my favorite, Yzerman sold off. And of course, we got to talk, can the Knights repeat? And I doubt. My money's on the Avalanche potentially. They're in the top 5 in betting. Yzerman sold off at the end of last season. And I was upset because we still had a shot at the playoffs at that time. And then the bottom fell out. I recognize the issue of the salary cap era and free agency and the desire to get something for someone who's going to go away probably and get nothing in return. And Bertuzzi, he needed opportunity somewhere else. And for his money, we could get 2 other players for the price of 1, is my thinking.
Stay with us. We'll be right back. Hi, my name is Ed Bondarenka, and I host Your American Heritage on Saturdays at 2 in the afternoon on this station. Your American Heritage is a show about the struggle we find ourselves in and how to react to it in the light of our biblical and American heritage. Listen to it while you're working around the house, the garage, cleaning the guns, walking the dog, driving, or just lazing around. Join me at 2 o'clock Saturdays here on Wham Radio, 1600 AM, 92.7 FM.
God bless America.
Yeah, and that was, at the time, I was a little bit puzzled by that move last year by Steve Yzerman to trade away Tyler Bertuzzi because the Red Wings were still in the playoff chase for the Eastern Conference, but I guess he thought at the time he was thinking long term, that he couldn't get an extension done with Bertuzzi. So he said, okay, I'm going to trade you because your contract is expiring after the season. I want to get something for you if I can't sign you long term. And that was a bold move. And in return, looks like a great move by Steve Yzerman. So hopefully this Red Wings team is possibly going to be a playoff team this year. I'm cautiously optimistic about this upcoming season because of the addition of Alex DeBrincat, a Farmington Hills native, acquiring him from the Ottawa Senators. Steve Yzerman committed highway robbery and getting him from the Senators. Because it was rumored that DeBrincat wanted an 8-year contract extension, but Yzerman swindled the Senators and got him for a 4-year contract extension. An unbelievable move. Steve Yzerman has great negotiating abilities. You know that Donald Trump, he was the master of the art of the deal. Well, in hockey, you could call Yzerman the Donald Trump of the National Hockey League.
Yeah, although Donald screwed up the original USFL with overspending way beyond the league's means, creating an arms race back then. But yeah, that's a whole, Devellano was really good at brokering deals, how he pulled together the Russian Five. I'm hopeful, but I say to Stevie, what you did as a player, admire you to no end. But that was then, this is now, and now you must make the playoffs. These moves have to work. Draft choices and all that you've worked in, and the free agents coming in must get us to the playoffs this year, as we probably would have last year, but not gone far, had we kept that team intact. But I think we got as good or better replacements for what we lost.
Yeah, it looks like I'm hopeful that the Red Wings will have some of their younger prospects make the team this year. You know of Marco Kasper, one of their wingers. He certainly is capable of making the team. He got some playing time at the end of last season. There's some promise for him. Elmer Soderblom, he played early on last season, but then all of a sudden he got hurt and then played the remainder of the season in Grand Rapids, a huge 6'8" mammoth beast as a forward. That
should be on the Pistons, right?
Yeah, he should be playing power forward for the Detroit Pistons. But who would have ever thought a 6'8" guy with great skating ability playing hockey? But it does happen. Yzerman drafted huge, tall players when he was the general manager with the Tampa Bay Lightning, so it shouldn't surprise.
That is the norm now, the bigger, but you cannot overlook the Cicerellis of the world. Bigger is not always necessarily better. I mean, some of them short guys can skate through the legs of the big guys. And to see that guy on the ice, it's like everybody else looks like a doggone midget, including the 6'4" goaltenders. But again, to not make this all about Detroit, can Vegas repeat, or who do you think is your favorite for the Cup?
It's really tough right now for me to comment on this because I'm not really in hockey mode right now because I'm so concentrated on football. But I know there have been some repeat champions in the past 10 years, the Tampa Bay Lightning and the Pittsburgh Penguins. Those are the two repeat champions. Vegas, they would have a pretty good shot to repeat, but they don't have the most talented overall squad. They were great as a team last year. That was unheard of for them to win the Stanley Cup championship in only their 6th season in franchise history. That's unheard of for an expansion team that young to quickly win a Stanley Cup championship. It's just going to be really tough now because they don't have the element of surprise anymore. They got a huge target on their back now. So I think that's going to make it all the more tougher for them to repeat.
Blowing it their first season because the way supplemental draft went, they loaded up with a bunch of otherwise free agents that were going to leave their team, so they were left unprotected. They almost won the cup their first year, like the St. Louis Blues did, although St. Louis Blues had a distinct advantage because that was when they split conferences and they were all new expansion teams in the one conference. It was assured an expansion team was going to make it to the cup that year, way back when.
Right. So if I were to make a prediction, I can't really boil it down to one team. I'll give you 3 picks, possible Stanley Cup championship this upcoming season. I'm going to say the Colorado Avalanche. They've got a very talented squad led by their top defenseman, Cale Makar, and the Tampa Bay Lightning. You can't count them out. They're a little bit longer in the tooth, but they still have quality players led by Steven Stamkos, their great scoring winger, and the Carolina Hurricanes. They've been knocking at the door for a little while, have made some mini runs in the Stanley Cup playoffs, but haven't broken through. So I would keep my eye out for those top 3 teams.
I think that's sensible. And to name one of 31, it's not like NFL, there aren't as many teams, right? Hockey, the NHL, you got 31 franchises. There is more parity in the NHL than there is in any of the other leagues. Now, the Tigers, I've been saying to pivot, I think are turning a corner. Miggy retiring is going to launch the Tigers, in my opinion, or at least I hope, next year, because all that salary cap open for free agents.
I'm hoping Chris Ilitch opens up the pocketbooks and replaces Miguel Cabrera's salary, and I hope he just doesn't decide to be like the Oakland Athletics owner, who has been known to be cheap. The Athletics have been a baseball team.
Who are moving to Vegas soon, right? And yeah, Chris is not Marion, that's for sure.
Yeah, he certainly needs to open up the pocketbook because the Tigers, yes, they're not going to miss out on the playoffs this year. There are some young players have been stepping up. They've gotten better as the season has gone along. Spencer Torkelson at first base. He hasn't hit for a high average, but his power numbers have been getting better as the season has gone along and his run production as well. And Riley Green, unfortunately, he seems to have this injury bug because he plays with reckless abandon. Earlier in the season, he was chasing down a fly ball into center field, injured himself, and had to miss some time. He made a diving catch about a month ago against the White Sox on the road, and now he's out for the remainder of the year with an injured elbow. But when those 2 guys are on the field, like lightning in a bottle, and hopefully they will continue to have sustained success, which I believe they certainly can in the near future. You got to look at Tarek Skubal as far as the Tigers pitching rotation goes. He has been lights out since he came back from his injury earlier on in the season. The return of Casey Mize, shelved with Tommy John surgery, if he can come back and be effective, and Matt Manning as well. Those 3 could be the Tom Glavine, Greg Maddux, and John Smoltz that the Atlanta Braves had in the 1990s. If those 3 guys live up to that hype and can be that high-quality pitching trio, the Tigers, they could set themselves up for a run, a great run of success, as long as they upgrade some other positions that they desperately need some hitting because they were a little bit lightweights at certain positions.
Yeah, if we're not dumb enough, deciding we couldn't keep both Scherzer and Verlander, letting Verlander get away, that started to decline. Then Scherzer says, I'm not hanging around, jumping ship. And we had no pitching then. So, yeah, if we're not dumb enough to trade a good pitching piece away for these other pieces and destroy our pitching ability, because you need that. But now to my least favorite of all the professional sports, the Detroit Pistons. If nothing else to say, that, years ago, people remember Malice at the Palace, the dust up there. More recently, Stewart got into a minor dust up with King James, LeBron James. And I immediately jumped on that night onto social media and created Melee at LCA to go with Malice at the Palace. And I'm still trying to get that to catch on. You're the sports guy. I need you to get Melee at LCA into the basketball nomenclature.
Yeah, I would love to do that. And I could definitely mention it, but I think the reason probably it hasn't resonated is because the Detroit Pistons have been stuck in a rebuild mode for basically the past 15 years. So any scuffles that happen with the Pistons and another team, they're just basically going to be brushed off by the fans. And because there's just no excitement right now for this Pistons team, that could be changing this upcoming season if their number one draft pick from a couple of years ago, Cade Cunningham, is able to make it through a full season. And I'm hoping he can stay out there on the court and play alongside Jaden Ivey, his back court mate, and hopefully create another Isaiah Thomas, Joe Dumars type high-quality backcourt for the Pistons from the 1980s.
That would be great. But that is the crux of it. Health, injuries, and, of course, obviously, Detroit is not the only place that runs into that problem, but it seems we do run into it an awful lot of the time. Speaking of King James, did he change teams again?
No, he's still with the Los Angeles Lakers.
Okay.
that I'm aware of. I'm kind of surprised he hasn't been talked about all that much on national sports programming. All of the attention now is on the Colorado Buffaloes football team with their head coach, Deion Sanders, because he tripled the Buffaloes win total from a year ago. And yes, that's all well and good, but there are other teams that you could mention across the country. And unfortunately, they really didn't give much credence to the Lions when they beat the Chiefs. They may have talked about it a little bit, but for the most part, all Deion Sanders all the time. And the Dallas Cowboys, too. There's such a huge obsession with the Cowboys on a national scale. I would just love to see a little bit more love for the Lions on the national level. But
they're getting a lot of attention right now. I mean, last year, what's that HBO show?
Oh, Hard Knocks.
They thought last year might be a breakout season, and they were featured. This year, the Jets were, because of Rodgers going to New York, and now he's out for the year with ACLU injury. They are getting a lot of love. I see from announcers on the national level, a lot of mentions during other games. I'm, again, surprised that so many are buying into this hype. The Barry Sanders era, the Billy Sims era. Another one bites the dust season. Was it 5 or 6 in a row to then bite the dust themselves? 0-16 season, got off to a perfect preseason. Oh, we're going to the Super Bowl that year. Then went 0-16. So please, hopeful, not optimistic. And with that, tell everybody again where they can hear you live and then after the fact also.
Once again, my name is Derek Stone. I'm the host of the Stone Cold Sports Truth on Wham Talk 1600 and also 92.7 FM, but you can only get that in the Chelsea, Michigan area. It's a 250 watt, only meant for a small area.
Like me broadcasting out of my house, right? I could broadcast to Wyandotte, but that'd be about it. Sorry, Go on.
No, that's all right. And my program airs every Sunday afternoon from 12:30 to 1, and you can also listen on live at whamradio.com.
but SoundCloud.
And yes, I post my program on SoundCloud. Just search Stone Cold Sports Truth.
So you could go to, well, I was going to say you could go to SoundCloud and hear last show, which we talked about U of M. It may still be, by the time this airs, the last show before this airs will be U of M still, most likely. I mean, your whole a long ways back of seasons are there to look for and hear back, right?
I'm only able to post about 10 programs at a time. I'm on the free plan right now on SoundCloud because I needed to save a little bit of money. It just wasn't making any sense for me to have one of their premium plans.
Get ready for a bump now that you've been on my show. But I hear you. I'm the same way. ChristiTutionalist Politics is hosted at Buzzsprout. I got a paid plan, but the minimum paid plan just first started this year in June. So I don't see much reason or need to, go hog wild with them, keep the costs down while I have these humble beginnings of the show. I mean, it's picked up everywhere else for free. So, I mean, I'm on 15 different podcast platforms for my little that I'm paying Buzzsprout. So it works out well. But SoundCloud is not one of them, though. I'm on some weird ones like Deezer, Podcast Addict, or I mean, there's some obscure ones that I've never heard of before. Spreaker, I heard of that one. I'm there. But some of these, it's like, I've never heard of them, but yeah, please carry my show. Right? All right. Well, thanks for stopping by, Derek. Take care. God bless, brother.
All right, Joe. Thanks for having me.
Greetings, everybody. I just wanted to record a brief video. Oh, well, if you don't know, these could be embedded somewhere else. J. Leonard Detroit is my handle across most social media. Joseph M. Leonard. It's not French. It looks like Leonard, but it's Leonard without an O here. Thank you for tuning into this. I just wanted to provide a brief update on my current projects. As you can see in the background, if you're seeing on video, not hearing audio only, ChristiTutionalist Politics podcast is now live. I started it in June. I hope you'll check it out. Buzzsprout is where it's housed. You could find transcripts to the shows there, as well as other places transcripts may be found and, of course, listen. Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, Spotify, TuneIn Radio, Anchor FM, the long list of all the places. I'm on 15 platforms right now where you can hear ChristiTutionalist Politics podcast. But I wanted to mention not just that, as I try to unwrinkle my shirt so you can see it, saying I am politically incorrect. I say Merry Christmas, God bless America, and all those things. Yeah, reading that aloud for those who may be hearing this on audio only. My third internationally available book, which will also be called ChristiTutionalist Politics, putting aside the left, right, liberal, conservative, Democrat, Republican paradigm narratives. ChristiTutionalists. Are you a real Christian? You're either Christian or you're not. Politics, if you're a real Christian, should be, of course, influenced by the Bible, the whole Bible, in context, not just lifting a particular scripture like Matthew, judge not lest ye be judged. That's not the whole scripture. Read the rest of it, as well as the dozen other scriptures in the Bible that talk about judging biblically, holding oneself accountable as you hold others accountable to the same set of standards, not double standards, not a hypocrite. Render unto Caesar. No, that does not mean socialism, communism, fascism, socialism, as if there's a dime's worth of difference between any of them now. They just all have minor qualms on how to achieve the exact same thing of them lording over you, them the ruling elites. It's not biblical. So please tune into the ChristiTutionalist Politics podcast. Look for ChristiTutionalist Politics, and I'm planning a ChristiTutionalist Politics 2 book for 2024 because 30 to 50 million Christians supposedly aren't even registered to vote, let alone vote and vote ChristiTutionalist politics values. So please like, comment, share, subscribe to ChristiTutionalist Politics. You can go to terrorstrikes.info, my current book, my main primary internationally available book, Terror Strikes Coming Soon to a City Near You. Though it's not a traditional Christian book or a fluffy Christian book, it is a Christian book nonetheless. terrorstrikes.info/subscribe. That way you'll be on the list to get the first notification of updates about all I'm up to, all these things talked about herein. Thank you for stopping by. And again, Buzzsprout is the main place for ChristiTutionalist Politics. You can use the shortcut tinyurl.com/ChristiTutionalist. Thank you for having tuned into ChristiTutionalist Politics Show. Also, please tune into Savage Unfiltered Podcast, of which I am a co-host, and be sure to check out more about today's discussion at thelibertybeacon.com, where my articles drop every Saturday. In addition to seeing the corresponding thelibertybeacon.com piece referenced in any episode of ChristiTutionalist Podcast, see to the show transcript on podcast platforms that provide access to it, like Buzzsprout, for additional bonus material there in the transcript. Thank you. Take care. God bless.
It is a myth that terrorism stopped during COVID. Unfortunately, mainstream media opted to prioritize pandemic hysteria over promoting all news. Terrorism continues. Simply hoping that it doesn't affect you is not a strategy. The new book, Terror Strikes, Coming Soon to a City Near You, featured on The Author Show, is now available in paperback from bookstores, online, or as an ebook exclusively through Amazon Kindle. Terror Strikes, Coming Soon to a City Near You by Joseph M. Leonard. Order today.